Today we're going to talk about how to cut out the day dress, and we're going to give you some tricks for cutting and laying out things, taking care of your fabrics. The first thing we did was to wash and dry our fabric. You want to wash and dry it just like you would the garment itself. So if you're a put it in the dryer kind of person, then you want to make sure you do that with your fabric before you sew it. Take some time pressing your fabric. When it comes out of the dryer, sometimes it can be really wrinkled, so I even will bring it out of the dryer a little damp sometimes and put it and press it, and that'll help get rid of any heavy creases. We start out with paper here at SoCo, and it's a really good trick to get used to doing. It helps you can flip and turn your material a little easier, especially if you're on kind of a sticky table like this fabric cover table. It also gives some structure to your fabric as well, so it makes it easier to cut. I'm going to start by looking at my pieces, and they've been taped together if you printed it off at home. We have 2 back pieces, we have 2 front pieces, and we have pockets, which we're going to need 4 of those. So we're just going to talk a little bit about the fabric, the face, the self, all those things and what they mean and how you lay them up on the fabric. The first thing we want to talk about when we're laying out our fabric is the grain line. It's really important with sewing that you always put this long piece of your garment, which is often marked on your garment as this long straight line with 2 arrows. That will be marked on your pattern. You want to place that parallel to your selvage. This is the bound edge of your fabric. This is the way it comes off the warp, and this is the way it lays nicest on the body. So that will be your long seam. So we want that in that direction. So for me, my selvage is here on the edge closest to me, and I would lay this pattern piece alongside. I would use a ruler even to make sure that it's straight with that line. Now with this pattern, we only printed out 1 of these. We have to flip this over to get the front, left, and right sides of this garment. Since we're working with something that has a face, you also really want to think about that, the front and the back. They're going to be 2 different colors. And so when you flip that to get the left and right, you just want to make sure you're turning it over and flipping it just like that. Also with certain fabrics, you want to make sure you're laying out in the same direction versus, the head is here. On the next one, you wouldn't want to have your head down on this end, depending on your pattern layout. So a lot of times with home sewing patterns, they'll say cut 2 at once. We in the industry prefer to lay it out all in one piece. So we open up that fold. When you buy material in the store, it often will come on a bolt. It'll be folded. So you want to have that full width going across. It's just a more consistent cut. As soon as you start layering, you start to go off a little bit. Even if you're a really good cutter, it can happen, especially with thicker fabrics or thin, widgy fabrics. So here, when we're cutting professional in the cutting room, we always cut on a single layer. As I start to lay out my pieces, I'm always thinking about the grain line, again, along that parallel to the selvage, which is your edge. I'm gonna get it close. You always wanna try to save your fabric, So I get close to the selvage as I can actually with this one, just to give us a better yield. We love to have extra fabric too for other little projects. So this is laid up straight, and then what we use here, we have dress weights that we use, pattern weights they're called. A lot of people use tuna cans, your cell phone, a pair of scissors. Anything you want to use to weight down your pattern is going to help you get a really nice clean cut line as well as your marking lines. When you're doing the pocket, you just remember there's only 1 pattern piece here, but you actually need to cut 4. You need to cut 2 going one direction and 2 going the other direction. Now we're going to talk a little bit about some marking tools that we use. You have a lot of options when it comes to marking your materials. They're these little tailor's chalks, they're called. You can buy waxy versions, but you can also buy a chalkier version. You just want to make sure that they will come out of your fabrics. For the most part, we're going to be cutting this off right now, but it's just something to think about. We use these a lot at SoCo. They're these cool pens that you can actually steam out the color on, and so you can write right on your fabric. And then we have this little nice chalk wheel, which leaves a nice line. And then these are tracing papers, and this has a pouncing wheel. What is this called? Tracing wheel. And these are different color papers, so you can choose which one will show up the best on your materials. We're gonna draw around this. We're gonna trace around our pattern. So what I'm gonna use the white chalk. It's got a nice sharp edge, and it's really gonna show up on this dark blue fabric. So that's something to think about. keep your, whatever you're using to mark the material, that it's pretty sharp, so it's gonna leave a nice line. There is an option here for length on this dress, and a lot of patterns will have that where you can make it longer or shorter, so just pay attention to those lines as you come in to cut this. So I went ahead and laid up everything here so you can see we've got our fronts and our backs, and then I flipped it and reversed it and traced around it on the other side. So you can see I didn't do all the notches on that, but you want to make sure that you do mark these notches that are on the pockets and on all your seams. And I'm going to show you in just a second how to cut out those notches. But basically at this point everything's straight, it's all on the grain, and so then we can get cutting. So one trick as I'm cutting, just like with the weights, the way we weighted down, I use my hand to keep my fabric really nice and flat, like really close to wherever I'm cutting. And when you get to corners and notches, you might need to turn your fabric a little bit. It's hard to do on this big table so that I'm showing you that, but sometimes that can make it easier at home if you turn it. So you can see here, I'm cutting to the inside of that drawn line. You can see here too, I'm kind of holding this seam allowance as I cut it. Just, you don't want to lift it up off the table. You want to always try to keep it as flat to the table as possible. One of the really nice things about the paper, now I've cut it off the roll, so it's not attached to anything. So now I can kind of use the paper to move it around, because once you start cutting and you start getting around some of these corners, you want to be able to get to it. So the paper really helps with that. I'm also going to kind of cut off some excess as I go. As you're cutting these, another trick with your scissors is to make nice long strokes. You don't want to make them choppy. You want to try to make a smooth line. This fabric is pretty easy to cut, but silks and those widgy kind of fabrics, polyesters even, they can get, you don't want to have all these little cuts, so make nice smooth lines. You can see here we've got all our pieces laid out here. They've been cut, they've been marked, the notches have been marked. Now we have a nice pattern that we can keep using. This way we can take it on and off, package it up, and use it again. So I just want to show you one last thing about these notches that we marked. There's a couple of different ways you can do your notches. If you're a beginning sewer, you know, again, I've marked mine here. You can mark them with a chalk. They're going to be inside your seam allowance, so you're not going to see those notches. Sometimes that's the easiest way. But if you've been sewing a while, I use the pointer of my scissors, and I get in close, and I do a little snip right where that notch is. It's minimal. It's about 1/4 inch. You don't want to go any farther than it's actually marked on your pattern. So the last thing I would do, now pattern's off, it's all marked. And then when we're at Soko here, we make a little bundle here. And then we can tie it up, and you take it to your machine and you're ready for sewing.